Hello everybody. I'll give you a couple of seconds to get yourself organised. There's a couple of things I just wanted to go through before I actually start. A few little things, obviously tools. You'll need a pick. You'll also need a latch tool at some point. And I also use this little part of a credit card because it's very useful for checking your latches are open. You just sit it in the needles and just go around the edge. And it just flicks them all open. Okay. Right, you'll have to excuse me because I'm having to move my hand over so I can see some of the comments. Okay. Also, for me, there's a time delay. I'm watching things I've already done, but that doesn't really matter. Anyway, I said about doing a couple of socks, but I've actually decided a lot of beginners find a problem doing the heels and toes with all the increases and decreases that come with the classic style. So I've decided to do the 3 wedge toe up first and then just give you some ideas on how it can be finished when you do get to the cuff. But the toe will be, as I said, a 3 wedge, but the heel will be a classic. So you will see both techniques, and obviously both can be transferred to the other because there's no difference between a heel and a toe classically or with the wedges. So, you know, it's entirely up to you. I prefer to have a wedge toe because it's quite rounded and I think it's more natural for the foot. Although I do quite like the classic heels, and especially with a shorter sock I like a deeper heel because obviously it sits a bit better on the foot. But anyway, we will come to that later. And hello to the people. Yes, I can see Amanda, Kevin, Marilyn, Kathy. Okay, right, so we're going to get started because that's the whole point of this demonstration. Obviously, if you use a cast on bonnet, now is the time that you would be putting it on your machine. But as most people who have come across me know, I tend to use the shower scrunchies because I find them quick and easy, and actually you don't throw away the whole scrunchie when you've finished using. You just cut off a small amount with the waste yarn and then it's ready for use again. So we're just going to put that on now. Okay. And then I just tie a little knot in the bottom and I plop in my soft weight. And then I thread up my machine. Now this is a 72 cylinder, and the only thing I will say is when it comes to the shaping for the wedge toe, there comes a time which I'll remind you of when we get there, where you might not have the same amount of needles left, but that's not a problem. Okay, let's just get it going. Now, with the wedge toe, I do something a bit different in terms of I don't have the shaping going on in front of me. It's actually going to be the other way round, and I'll explain that to you as to why I do it. And that is because you're going to be picking up the stitches from one side of the toe to actually join them together, and it's obviously a lot easier if you're working with them in the front. So you'll see what I mean as we go along. So okay, we finished with the waist yarn. Now you need a piece of ravel cord, which I'm now just putting in my machine. Okay. Okay, so I knit all the way round till I'm at what I class as the front of my machine, which is actually where your yarn carrier will be. Obviously you can see I haven't got one that you can see in the video. That's because I use a flatbed knitting mast, which I find a lot easier, and it makes tensions a lot better on the socks. Anyway, so you raise all the needles which actually will be in front of you. And you just finish bringing the ravel cord round to the front. Okay. The reason I've chosen to do this is because with the wedge toes or wedge heels, you don't have many increases. You have a few decreases, but you don't have so many chances where, being a beginner, that your stitches slip off the needles and you lose them. And I can remember when I first started, the frustration of thinking I'd got it all right, and then all of a sudden one would just drop off. And as I said, it can be quite disheartening, but this way it doesn't cause so many problems. And of course you get a nice sock at the end, so it's worth a try. Let me just, woo! I love live video, don't you? Okay, let's just wind that back on. Okay. Right, we've got the main yarn on, so this goes behind the first raised needle. I normally secure it with a clip because otherwise it has a tendency to jump out. And then I just knit across to the other side, and then I'll catch the yarn behind the first raised needle this side and then go back. Okay, then you raise a needle and knit back. One needle, back. Okay. Personally, I don't use heel forks. That's going to be something that will be entirely up to you. I tend to use my hand because I feel I know when stitches are tight or if the machine's not happy with knitting, so I can catch mistakes before they happen. Anyway, so you knit back again, and then when you've got the second needle past the halfway mark, you're going to raise all the needles to what would be your heel mark on your cylinder. So just bring them all up like that, just on that side, knit back, and then I do basically the same thing. I'm trying to make it easy, keeping my hands out the way. I raise all of those, and then I raise the one just past the heel mark. Then I knit back. Then I raise one, and then on the opposite side to the yarn carrier, you're going to drop 3. So you raise one and then you drop 3. Okay. Now the other problem that a lot of people have when you know, they're getting used to their sock machine is the fact that when you put needles down, remember you've already got loops at the bottom, so when you push your needles down, the latches tend to want to jump up. So the best thing is just to bring them down, and they just sit a little higher than the others, but these will knit nicely and you have less chance of the stitch dropping off the needle. So up, down, up, down. And you carry on doing this until you get back to the halfway mark. With the 72 cylinder, it does work out right that you have 3 needles to put down. But if your cylinder, it doesn't match, you just put down what you have left to the halfway mark. It really won't make much difference. Okay. So raise 1, drop 3. Raise 1, drop 3. And as you can see on this side, we're now back to the halfway mark. So we raise 1 and we drop 3 on the opposite side, which brings that to the halfway mark. So when you raise this needle, you are, in fact, it's like raising the first needle like when you started, so that's like the first 2 rows. So you go back and now you raise the second, and back and raise the second, and then you're actually starting doing the second wedge. So you bring all the needles up to the heel mark like you did before, and then you knit back. Raise all the needles on this side, and just raise the one past the heel mark, and once you've raised that one on this side, you drop these 3, and so starts the second wedge. So we'll just carry on and finish off the second, and then we'll be on to the third. If I'm knitting on my 108 cylinder, I actually sometimes have to do 4 wedges. As I said, although, you know, it says 3, with 4-ply yarn and most of the cylinders, 3 wedges are fine. But with the finer cylinders and finer yarn, you will actually find you will need to do more. But they still turn out very nice. Somebody's asking if I have written directions on how to do the wedge. I have got a sheet that I did for Kegworth Workshop. I'll try and find one and I'll put it in the files. But there is also a video on YouTube, and obviously this video will be in the crankers for people to look at when they like. Okay, so as you can see, I'm just coming round to doing the end of the second wedge and the start of the third. Right, second needle on that side's up, which reminds me I now have to bring these needles into work. Oh, sorry, out of work. Okay, round we go. Oh. Bring these up. bring this needle up, this one, and then we're into the last, raise 1, drop 3, and then we've actually got our 3 wedges. But as I said, try to remember not to let the latches go right down. I mean, personally, I don't have to do that so much now because I've been knitting them for a while, but it is something that is well worth keeping an eye on while you're practicing. So we're back to the beginning there, but we've got this side to finish. So we put the last 3 down, raise 1, then we just bring it forward to the centre, and we leave the yarn carrier there for the moment. Then we gently drop all the needles. Obviously you need to make sure their latches are open. Bring this piece of yarn up out of the way and you'll understand why in a minute. Okay, now the other thing I have to explain before I carry on is when you pick up stitches like this, you've got obviously all the needles past the halfway mark that are in front of you. Well, when you go to pick up the stitches, you will always be 1 stitch short, because as far as I know, it's because they're not true stitches, they're sort of the in-between loops, and therefore it isn't quite the same. So what I tend to do is, well, 2 things. One, where you can see where these, here you've got this latch that's flipping about in the wind, and that is going to be a potential hazard for you losing your stitches. So I tend to just bring the needle forward so I can get my tool into the 2 stitches that are laying there, and then I lay them on top of the latch, and therefore the latch can't flip up. And so there's 2 needles that are potentially like that when you've got this to this part where you're actually going to be picking up stitches for the toe, and that applies to both sides. So as I said, it's well worth remembering and making the effort. As I said, just let it lay flat and then the stitches themselves will hold the latch down for you. I'm just trying to cover all bases of things that could cause you to drop your stitches. Right, as I said, you're going to have 1 less. So I always start where I've got my loose piece of yarn, and when I get to look at my waste yarn and where the stitches are I'm going to pick up, you can see there's 1 there. So I will pick this one up, and this one will actually go on the first needle past the halfway mark. Okay, but on this side where you pick up the first stitch, I actually put it on the needle next to that one, not on the first one past the halfway mark. And you'll see why, because hopefully if you've done it right, you will have a loop for each of your spare needles, and therefore you won't have any holes. So just do this really fiddly bit. Okay. So basically you just pick up the loops in between where you can see the waist yarn, which is quite easy to do. Another reason the wedge toes work well is, I don't know how many of you have tried doing classic heels with toe up, but the actual knitting is so tight, even with the extra rows that you knit using that method, that it's sometimes almost impossible to attach these stitches to the opposite side of the cylinder. So you can see what a fiddly job it is. I'm just trying not to pick up the extra threads. And trying to keep my hands so you can see more of what I'm doing. Okay. Let's pick some up round here. What would be hilarious, as the fact it is a live thing, is if I get to the centre and I actually have a needle and nothing to put on it. But hopefully we will be all right. Okay. Well, miracles do happen, and we just have this one left for the last needle. That's it. Okay, they're all on. Anything I'm going to do is move that out of the way. Okay, now the nice thing with this also is if you weave this little piece that you started with in between a few of the needles, you don't actually have anything to sew in. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out, let me just see if I can get a bit more light than what I've got. Okay, you get a little bit of a gap here just because of the style of the pattern, and what I tend to do is I just pick up the bump of a stitch that's previously been knitted and I lay it onto one of the needles. There's no specific needle it has to go on, it's just one that makes it look a lot tidier. Sometimes it's one, sometimes it's two. But yes, it just closes up that little gap, which obviously makes the toes a lot more neat. Okay, just going to put my row counter back to 0. Okay, so now I make sure all the latches are open. Very important, because after all your hard work, this could be a disaster if you've got any that are shut. And then just very slowly, and especially on the 9 o'clock and the 3 o'clock position, just tend to go a little bit slower to give the machine chance to knit a few of the stitches off, because obviously there's a few on there, and you don't want to end up losing them. So okay, sorry. So we go around. Now I've got one there that actually left a stitch behind, so I'll just knit that off myself. Okay, Now the thing with this, the way that you've done the toe, all your, if you've used a cast on bonnet or in my case a scrunchie, because you've now picked up all those stitches, the piece underneath is literally hanging round this edge. It's not hanging centrally. So this is why I like soft weights, because you can just get your weight and you can just sit it in the middle like that, and then you can knit. And in this case, we're pretending it's a sock for me, although there'll only be one. So I've got to knit 50 rows. So just be a bit careful on the first couple. And then off we go. Just keep an eye on the fact that sometimes the stitches raise up. It's normally when the weight is going past the ribber adjuster arm, which is obviously inside my cylinder. Okay. Coming up on my 50 rows, so this time for ease, and obviously there's no difference in the toe, so it doesn't matter which way you knitted it, we are now going to raise the needles at the back, ready to do the heel. Okay, as I said, I tend to like a deep heel, so I'm going to take 2 stitches past the halfway mark and then raise the rest. But you don't have to, you can just use the halfway mark as your measure and do what you normally do. Okay, so then obviously we knit round. So now we're ready for the what I call the classic heel. I tend to put the yarn round the first needle out of work, and then I raise the needle next to it, and then I knit. So when I'm round this side again, I do the same. I've got the yarn round the first needle that's already raised, and I raise another, so it's like you've taken 2 out of work, but it gives a nicer finish to the heel. And now we just do what you would normally do, which is raise 1 and knit. Yeah. And you carry on raising 1 on the yarn carrier side, 1 at a time. Comes to a time when I take my weight out, and then I just tend to use my hand and the fabric of the sock to hold down while I carry on knitting. It's because I'm not holding it down right. Now, one of the things I've found with not using buckles and weights is the closer you can get your knitted fabric to your cylinder, the happier your machine is. So, as I said, there's still a bit of a stretch there, so I sort of have to move my hand to accommodate whereabouts on the cylinder I am. But as the gap gets shorter, obviously that's easier. So you just carry on raising 1 on the side that the yarn carrier is. That one has not knitted. Now if you get that happen on your machine when you're using weights, it is a weight issue. So yeah, you just have to keep an eye on these things. Okay. Okay, so we're where the heel mark is, so we lift that last one. When we get this side and lift one, in this particular instance, for people that are new to it, this is quite a nice and easy way to do it, where you lift one here and you're going to drop two on the side opposite the yarn carrier. But this is where it's important, as I said, that you can see those little latches, and if I go like that, you see, look, they're sticking out, and they'll be quite happy to throw your stitches off and, you know, spoil your hard work. So yeah, just make sure you've got them raised just a little bit. So you lift on the yarn carrier side, you drop on the opposite side. Okay. I mean, you can leave these reasonably high. You know, that's about half of the other needle size, and it will still knit your stitches. But yeah, that is something to keep an eye on. I find it's just a case of getting into habits. It's like I always keep my thumb on the latches as I drop them, because also if you just push your needles down, they do have a tendency for the latches just to bounce up, and then, you know, it makes knitting it off quite hard. Yeah, I can see Matthew saying his way is different, but yes, there is so many ways of doing heels and toes, different ways of doing the increases, decreases. Excuse me, I have, you know, look, live video and all that. Just got to get a plaster. I'll be back. Okay, sorry, I apologise for that, but I didn't want to bleed all over the knitting. Right, back to doing the heel. Christine, when it comes off the machine, I'll be able to show it to you, and then you can make your own decision on that. I mean, personally, as I said, I'm only trying to show the simple, basic ways to do these things, because it's actually, you know, it's focused on people who are new to sock knitting and maybe haven't had their machine long, or have been struggling because there's nobody close by that, you know, that they can go and see who could possibly help. So as I said, we're not doing any complicated stuff, hence the fact, you know, we're not doing ribbing or anything, because, you know, those things, they come later. Most people are just so happy if they can actually make a sock without having a hole or a ladder in it. So, you know, that's the purpose of this particular video. Oops. Okay. But remember, because I was doing a deep heel, I'm not stopping at the halfway mark. I have to carry on knitting for another couple of needles. So we'll raise that one. We'll drop those two. Raise that one. We'll drop this two. These will be the last two on that side. So we've just got, okay, we've got a bit of a glitch here. A simple way round this, and I'm glad that in that sense that something like this has come up, because it does at least help you. What I will do is I will pull the yarn here, and I'm going to bring it round the back of all the needles that are in hold to where it didn't knit properly. And I'm going to undo that row. Okay. So just gently pull the yarn forward. If it was only maybe one or two needles that didn't knit, I would just have manually knitted those, the loop, but because it's several, it would notice the tension would be different. So what I'm doing is I'm taking it back to where it started not knitting, as you can see, a lot. Okay. But because I've taken the yarn round the back, it's back to where it should be. Bear with me. Let's get that piece of waste yarn out of the way. Right. Okay. So we come back round here. And we carry on knitting round to where we would have been. And then I know, because of where I was, that we're now going to knit back. Oops. So it would be that one. It would be those two that I would have actually been putting down on that side. So let's carry on. Okay, so we just raise that one, and then we're going to come round to the front, and then we're going to drop the needles down, but make sure the latches are open. As I said, it's a good idea to put your finger over the latches as you bring them down. Slowly, you've got less chance of any being shut. Okay, all right. Now we're at the other side of the heel, so we just gently knit the first row round. Just to make sure those stitches knitted off nicely. I'm going to change my yarn carrier, and as I say, this is going to be a short sock. I'm just trying to think. I'll do about 30, possibly 40 rows. I think 30 is going to be fine. Okay. Now, the reason I've stopped is because I wanted to talk to you about the fact of this being a toe-up sock, and you know, it does have some limitations with finish, but in other ways it's actually quite nice. A lot of mine, some of you have seen my socks, I would put the ribber on and I would rib to finish, take it off on waste yarn, pick up the rib stitches, and I would just hand rib cast off because it gives it a nice springy edge. Somebody else might know, but I don't know of a nice springy way of casting off on the machine that would work for a rib. But if you wanted a roll top, which is quite nice, you just can do a latch cast off. I had this conversation with a lady in Australia the other day who'd done her toe up, and we weren't sure whether you could do a hung hem. So I experimented in the afternoon with the intention of talking to her again in the evening, and it is actually possible, 2 different ways to do a hung hem on the top of the sock that actually looks quite nice when it's finished. As I said, you could latch cast this off and it would just be a rolled, the stocking stitch would roll, and that looks quite modern. I like it on the shorter type socks, and especially on my finer cylinders, they make nice trainer socks with just a little rolled top where you don't really see much of the sock at all. But for the purpose of this sock, we will do, I think, we'll just do a latch cast off, so the simplest form that we can do. So basically what I'd do, this is my last row, so I would knit round to the front, and then I'm going to pick up all the needles so that they're all out of work, and then I will knit round so the yarn is out of the way, and then I will finish bringing these up. And there's a reason for this, because to latch off on live stitches it's much easier if the needles are up out of work. You're not likely to have many accidents. So basically we will just get some yarn, Don't need it in the yarn carrier anymore, so we'll take it out. So yeah, it's on the outside here. Basically, I'll use a bigger latch tool just because it might be easier to see it. You take your latch tool and you bend the needle forward because you've got the spring, so you've got a nice big gap to get your latch in. You take your yarn and you would just put it round the latch in the hook, bring it back so it knits through to a loop. And then you would do the same by bringing the one next door, put your latch in, put your yarn round, pull it through. And you just carry on doing that around the cylinder. My only criticism of a sock machine is there comes a point that you have to swap hands because of it being circular, which can be fun. I'm lucky because I'm left-handed by birth, but I'm quite ambidextrous, so I can cope with doing it with my right hand. I can't move because of the tripod for my camera, but of course most of you could move your seat, so you could possibly use the same hand anyway. But yeah. Oh. Okay, gonna have to swap hands now. Bring my bit of yarn round. Drop the needle forward. The nice thing with this method is we've already woven in the end on the toe. All you will have when this sock comes off in terms of sewing will be this one little thread here when you finish latch tooling the top. So they're basically knit on machine ready to wear. Come on. Oops, didn't like that one. So we go back. It's caught on a little bit of yarn. Let's go. Okay, we'll just let it go. Drop that one out. Just make sure I can pick my loop up. That's it. And we go again. It's playing up. That's better. Libby says about deep heel. Basically, it's just that the shaping goes up a bit further, so you have, because you make almost like a pocket that your heel goes in, it makes it a deeper pocket for your heel to sit in. Trying to attack my clothes. Right, we're almost back to where I can swap hands again now. Another couple, I think. I didn't know that, Christine, that roll tops are good for diabetics. I suppose the thing is they don't want things tight round their legs, do they? But I say, I think they look quite attractive. If I'm honest, in lots of ways I prefer the roll top to the hem on the top of a sock. But obviously that's pure preference on my part. Okay. Oh. Right, just ask a quick question, as I obviously am just sitting here casting this off. Has it actually been helpful to anybody who's starting their sock machine journey? It would be nice to know if it has, because, you know, then we'll have some idea if it's worth doing some others that would obviously gradually get into things that are a little bit more complex. Obviously this video will be uploaded onto Crankers, so you can obviously look at it again and possibly go and knit along and knit your socks along with the video, as I said, which can be helpful to some people. At least you can stop and pause it, I think, when you like. Okay, so we just bring that through like that. All right, let's just bring this, drop the needles down, just knit around. Okay. So last job to do, which is not actually anything to do with the machine, but so you can actually see the sock, is I'll just pull out the cord. I normally actually do this while it's, once I've actually got the stitches on for the sock, for the toe before I start knitting the foot, but obviously I was thinking time-wise, because these things, you're never sure how long it's going to take. So yeah, just pull out the waist, pull that bit off. And there we are. There's your nice deep heel and your sock. As I said, it's nice toe, nice heel, comes nice long way up, which I personally like. And you've got your little roll top. And as I said, you've got this little bit of yarn, and to be fair, it's not really under any pressure. So in this case, and because it's rolled, I shall just cut it off. And there you have it. Thank you very much, Tobias. Okay then, folks. Jean said an hour, so it is almost an hour. So I hope that has been useful. If anybody's got any questions or would like to know anything or ask about something, you can always message me. You're very welcome to do that. As I said, I try to help people when they're new. I love my sock machines, and I would just like you all to love them too. So on that note, I will say good night and happy knitting, and hopefully we'll do another one again soon.